Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Musa Passion, and the final game week of the WSL campaign for 2024 has officially come to an end, ringing in the festive season, and indeed, it was a weekend to be merry as we were treated to some big surprises and festive twists, so let's get right into it. The Holly Jollies began in Brighton, where the Seagulls were looking to get back to winning ways against Tottenham Hotspur, who themselves wanted to continue on their positive path results-wise, so a lot was at stake in the game, and both teams arguably played like it, with a lot of caution initially being expressed by both sides, but eventually they did open up, as it would not take too long for them to really get into the grip of things, with Brighton in particular really excelling in carving up opportunities, but the opposition stood firm nevertheless to keep things level. The pattern continued well into the second half, with Brighton dominating proceedings but lacking a goal to show for it, while Spurs were making the most of their fleeting moments. And it would be one of those fleeting moments against the run of play that would see Beth England open the scoring for the visitors, which managed to win the Seagulls, albeit momentarily. And I do say momentarily because the home side would not bend to the pressure, as they would find the lever just 7 minutes later, courtesy of a wondrous volley from Ole Slagers to salvage a draw for her side, as both sides settled for a draw, which will be rude by Brighton considering how well they performed in this match, especially against a team who they really should have done more against, all things considered. But up next was Leicester City, who took on Chelsea in what should have been another routine victory for the champions, especially considering that Leicester were having to make a substitution so early on in the first half, which did suggest that it was going to be a very tough afternoon for the hosts. But that was not the script that Leicester read, apparently, as the Foxes actually turned the game on its head against the run of play also, and who else but substitute Missy Goodwin, who opened the scoring to stun the champions halfway through the first half. Leicester channeled their inner golem because they defended their precious lead with everything they had and managed to keep out the Blues for the remainder of the first half and the majority of the second half. It was looking hopeless for the champions, and it took a solo charge from Vicky Captain to finally lob the ball home from downtown to draw Chelsea level and ultimately save themselves some blushes, as the match did end up being 1-1, with both sides undoubtedly being unhappy with the results, with Leicester for one ruining their opportunity to have caused a much more major upset than what ended up happening, and Chelsea for their part being disappointed that they have dropped points for the first time this season, which did definitely crack open, albeit very slightly, a window of opportunity for the rest of the chasing pack, which we will cover later on in this video. If the end to Saturday's action was shocking, then the beginning of Sunday's was downright unforeseen, as we headed to Merseyside for the first of two fixtures in the area, with Everton take on Manchester City in what yet again should have been a predictable outcome, but once again, the underdog did not read the script, and in this case, Everton just freestyled it arguably, because they were the first team not named Chelsea to really take it to Manchester City this season. The Toffees were well drilled and were aggressive right from the start, but despite their superior quality, they were at the mercy of Everton's doggedness, and much like that champions, from Everton made sure to make the opportunities highly indicative, every single at least in my opinion, with losing major losses of Shaw and after heading home to put the Toffees in the lead, and it would have been two not too long after names aside, and City did manage to finally get themselves a goal back in the dying embers just the game as Alba Fugino was nevertheless the insurance goal came before Fowler not Hayashi for the one to double the score for the ball to give City going into the second half. The consolation goal in their shock 2-1 defeat to Everton in what was ultimately a deserved win for the latter, who have claimed yet another major scalp in this WSL season and throwing a spanner in the works of City's title hopes. We returned to the London area once more for what was honestly an underwhelming match. I mean, it was pretty much kind of like a clinic, if I'm being more objective here and not subjective by calling it underwhelming, to put it kindly, as Crystal Palace and Manchester United took part in their Game Week 10 fixture, which did start quite brightly admittedly, and in all honesty, when looking at it as a whole, Palace were the architects of their own defeat in this game, as not only did they fail to capitalize on the very good chances they carved out for themselves on more than one occasion, but they also caused their opponents to get the lead, as some poor playing out from the back saw the Eagles get punished by Gabby George, who took advantage of this compopulation to score and put the Red Devils in the lead. And that is how this match would end, as Manchester United moved themselves closer to their local rivals and Chelsea as well, taking full advantage of both teams' earlier slip-ups as well as Brighton's draw. Our penultimate game of the year saw West Ham take a trip up north to Birmingham, where they took on managerless Aston Villa on the back of former manager Robert De Paul leaving his post earlier in the week. Talk about a mouthful there. And much like how the sky is blue, Aston Villa bore witness the fruits of a new, or in this case, a no manager bounce, as it only took 4 minutes for Villa's salvo to find the back of the net, courtesy of a superb strike from Canadian star Adriana Leon. The Villains were in rare form, but West Ham were not going to allow themselves to be any pushovers, as they would level just 17 minutes later and eventually led for a moment before their strike was ruled off for offside, with none other than Asei being the recipient of both goals, including the one that was ultimately chalked off. The tenacity of the visitors was highly commendable, but it was not enough to keep the hosts pacified, with Leon yet again finding herself in a great position, and she did not need any secondary invites to tuck the ball away to restore the lead in time for the halftime whistle. Continuing where they left off, Villa maintained their stranglehold over West Ham to the point that no matter what the Hammers tried, Villa had a response to it. In essence, their performance in this game was akin to Everton's in their match against Man City, and the statement would be rubber stamped to the final minutes thanks to a solo run from Kenza Daly, who paid out on the opportunity she was provided to wreak havoc to give Villa the deserved 3-1 victory in what is yet to be identified as either another false dawn for the Villains or an actual new beginning for them. The final match of the year was a box office encounter on paper, but a training clinic on execution, much like the Manchester United and Crystal Palace game, as Liverpool hosted yet to be beaten under Renee Slager's Arsenal. It started off really promising as Liverpool came out swinging effectively right out of the gate, and did give the Gunners a few headaches admittedly, with Sophia Smith especially being the main culprit of this early pain for the Gunners. Liverpool though were somewhat undone by their overzealousness, as Arsenal would soon capitalize on their folly with a corner routine that saw Alessia Russo receive the ball virtually unmarked and fire it into an empty net to give the visitors the lead. Liverpool's misery would only be further compounded as Arsenal won a penalty not too long after, but new signing Caldente was unable to convert her effort after it hit the bar despite her sending the keeper the wrong way. The rest of the game pretty much followed this pattern, with Arsenal being in firm control and never ever really being in real danger of losing their grip on the game, despite the hosts coming close on a few occasions, but it ultimately ended in a tidy but not all too comfortable 1-0 to the Arsenal to bring their 2024 domestic profiles to a very good end. And with the halfway stage of the WSL now nearing, the current standings are beginning to develop some interesting narratives as we get near to the business end of the season, with Arsenal and Manchester United bearing down on both Chelsea and Manchester City, particularly the latter if we're being honest with each other, because 7 points is still a big gap to close, whilst Aston Villa have made a mighty leap away from the relegation zone, which hopefully can encourage them to have a more prosperous 2025 that can see them continue to garner momentum and possibly avoid the drop. And that'll be it for today's video. What were your thoughts on the matches that were played throughout the weekend, and what do you think will be the final outcome of the season come 2025? Which was relegation, champions, and top 3 winners. Leave your thoughts in the section below where you put the comments, the comment section. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.